Today I'm honored to welcome my friend, Prime Minister Turnbull of Australia, and Mrs. Turnbull. Thank you very much. It's a great honor. We're looking forward to sending our newly nominated ambassador, Admiral Harry Harris, to you very shortly. He's an outstanding man. You're going to find that. He's a great man. I want to thank the Prime Minister for offering his condolences on the horrible tragedy in Parkland, Florida. Americans are grateful for the prayers and support of our Australian friends, and friends they are, as our entire nation grieves the senseless loss of 17 precious lives and all of the horribly injured. The United States and Australia are currently honoring 100 years of mateship, a term that you used very beautifully, Mr. Prime Minister. A century has passed since brave Americans and Australians first fought together in World War I. Over the last 100 years, our partnership has thrived as a bulwark of freedom, security, and democracy. Last spring, the Prime Minister and I celebrated the remarkable 100-year milestone during an extraordinary evening on the USS Intrepid. And my friend Greg Norman and Anthony Pratt and some of the others who are in the room today, they were, hello folks, stand up Greg, stand up Anthony, where's Anthony? Good, it was a great evening, thank you. This afternoon I'm pleased to announce that the United States will name the Littoral Combat Ship 30, the USS Canberra, in honor of an Australian cruiser lost fighting alongside the U.S. Navy during World War II. Our Secretary of the Navy has chosen Australian Minister of Defense, Maurice Payne, to be her sponsor. I know that the USS Canberra will be a worthy successor to both her Australian namesake and her American predecessor, the former Navy Baltimore-class heavy cruiser, USS Canberra. As she sails the open sea, the new USS Canberra will symbolize to all who cross her path the enduring friendship between the United States and Australia. There is no closer friendship. Today, strengthened by our common values and history, we're working together to promote our mutual interests. I want to thank the Prime Minister for serving as a strong voice for peace and stability across the entire Indo-Pacific region. Australia is one of our closest partners in our campaign of maximum pressure to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. Today, we put the strongest sanctions on Korea that we have ever put on a country. We must continue to stand together to prevent the brutal dictatorship from threatening the world with nuclear devastation. Our nations likewise share a commitment to keeping our people safe from terrorism. Australian troops are currently serving alongside Americans and our partners in Afghanistan and the coalition to defeat ISIS. Together, we're denying terrorists safe haven, cutting off their funding, and discrediting their wicked ideology. ISIS land has been largely recaptured, almost 100%. I'm very honored to say. And they are on the run. Our strong partnership can also be seen in our flourishing economic relationship. Australia remains a key market for U.S. defense products. We make the greatest products in the world, so you have very good taste in choosing our product. Automobiles and aircraft, and our fair and reciprocal trading relationship is a model for other countries as we seek bilateral agreements. News that America is open for business has also reached Australian shores. In May, Australian entrepreneur Anthony Pratt announced a new $2 billion investment in box-making factories across the United States. But he only did that if Trump won the election, I think. Is that a correct statement, Anthony? Thank you. Boy, that was a close one. I was worried. These people would have had a field day if you gave the wrong answer. Thank you. No, but Anthony did call, and he said if he wins the election, we're going to spend billions of dollars in the United States. And I appreciate your giving me a very, very correct comment. Thank you, Anthony. I'll never do that again. This investment will continue to build on an almost 100,000 American jobs that are taking place and already supported by Australian companies. I'm glad to share that the United States is also by far the largest investor in Australia. In the room today are dozens of American and Australian business leaders and great athletes, great athlete and business leader, by the way, Greg, who are working together to identify further opportunities for bilateral investment and cooperation. Mr. Prime Minister, I also want to take this opportunity to congratulate you on your immigration reforms and on Australia's commitment to merit-based immigration. Are my friends from Congress listening to that? Merit-based. We want to do merit-based immigration also. And then we will. That really protects the interest of Australia and its people. It's the way to go. And you've been very successful with it here. We're working very hard to do the same. In that sense, we're going to hopefully follow in your footprints. Prime Minister Turnbull, it's been a pleasure to host you today. We had a great lunch with your representatives. A lot was discussed. A lot of deals were made for the purchase of additional military equipment and other things. For a century now, the people of the United States and Australia have inspired the world with their determination, their bravery, and their generosity. I know that our close friendship and enduring alliance and our personal friendship will grow even stronger in the century to come. Our relationship with Australia will always be a very powerful and very successful relationship. It's been incredible, and it's only getting better. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Mr. President, thank you so much. Lucy and I want to thank you and First Lady Melania Trump for your very warm welcome, your generous hospitality and friendship. Our meeting today was a great opportunity to strengthen and deepen our engagement with the United States. You are our most important strategic and economic partner, and to lay the groundwork for a new phase of intensified cooperation, the next 100 years of mateship. Now, I'm here, as you noted, Mr. President, with the most substantial Australian delegation ever to travel to Washington, D.C. We have, in addition to the CEOs, several of whom you have identified here today, who are busy creating jobs, and we spent much of our time today talking about jobs. They are creating jobs in Australia and in the United States, demonstrating that our two great nations committed to competition, to freedom, to economic innovation, science and technology working together, complement each other, and that's why we're seeing strong jobs growth in both countries. We've had 403,000 jobs created last year in Australia, the largest number, Mr. President, in our country's history, in 16 months of continued jobs growth. And we have been inspired, I have to say, by your success in securing the passage of the tax reforms through the Congress. We have secured some tax reforms in terms of reducing company tax, but not as much as we need to do. We've got more work to do. And the stimulus, the economic stimulus that your reforms have delivered here in the United States is one of the most powerful arguments that we are deploying to persuade our legislature to support reducing business tax, because as you are demonstrating, and as we all know, when you cut company tax, most of the benefit goes to workers, it produces more investment, and when you get more investment, you get more jobs. And of course, I'm also joined on this visit with 6 of the leaders of our states and territories. The only 2 that are not here, Mr. President, are those that are fighting elections. So as you can imagine, that's always a top priority. And we're meeting at the National Governors Association, again, broadening and deepening the relationship. We have a huge amount to work with. Our relationship, as you said, has been forged over a century through times of war and peace, securing both our nation's freedom and security in the world. But our relationship is based not only on history. We have the same values. We share a deep well of trust and spirit based on those enduring values of freedom, democracy, the rule of law, enterprise, ingenuity, the spirit of having a go, and if it doesn't work out, dust yourself off and have another go. That is a core American and Australian value. That spirit of enterprise is what leads us on. And of course, our relationship is underpinned by millions of people-to-people and family links, and of course the extensive economic cooperation we've spoken about. Our security alliance is as close as it possibly could be, yet keeps getting closer. The cooperation is more intense than it has ever been. Whether we are standing up for freedom's cause in the Middle East, in our region, around the world, combating terrorism, the cooperation in a connected world that we need to have is greater than ever. And that trust between Australia and the United States, between the thousands of brave servicemen and women who are working together right now, that trust underpins our security. And you mentioned, Mr. President, our economic relationship and trade. Do you know, since the Australia-US Free Trade Agreement came into force in 2005, two-way trade has grown by over 50%. The United States does have a trade surplus with Australia of $25 billion. It's your third largest trade surplus with us. But, you know, we know it works for both of us. The two-way investment has more than doubled in the past decade. It was worth around $1.1 trillion in 2016. Again, boosting jobs and growth in both our nations, both our economies. And today, we've agreed on some new initiatives that will deepen this relationship further. We're seeking to expand transparent and competitive global energy markets, cooperating on high-quality infrastructure investment in the United States and in the region. We've spent a lot of time talking about infrastructure, including urban infrastructure, a subject, Mr. President, of course, you have a lifetime of experience in, and the leadership you're showing on infrastructure in the United States is being admired around the world, and Australian companies and Australian experience is there to help, as you know, and is already operating here. A number of our infrastructure players are very active in the US. We're obviously working to intensify our cooperation on digital trade. Bob Lighthizer and Wilbur Ross from your side, Steve Chobo, my trade minister who's here with them today, have made terrific progress in that regard. Now, we turn to security. Yesterday, Lucy and I were with General Dunford at the Arlington National Cemetery. And we honoured America's war dead. We honoured an Australian airman who had died in combat in New Guinea in the Second World War, who was buried there at Arlington also. And we are reminded that all of the freedoms we enjoy, whether it is in our Parliament in Canberra or here in Washington in the White House or in the Congress, all of those freedoms have had to be secured generation after generation by courageous men and women defending freedom's cause. Our freedoms have depended on them. And Americans know, as Australians know, that each of us have no better ally. We are mates, 100 years of mateship. We're working together, as you said, to address the greatest threat to our region right now, North Korea's illegal nuclear weapons program. And I want to welcome and, of course, support, Mr. President, the new sanctions that have been announced today. And we continue to do precisely the same with our own autonomous sanctions and, of course, enforcing the UN Security Council mandated sanctions. We're working to combat terrorism around the world, helping the Iraqis and the Afghans build up the resilience to hold their countries secure in the face of terrorists. And of course, we both recognise that the prosperity of our region, and indeed the world, has been underpinned and in fact built on a foundation of a rules-based order which has been secured by the leadership of the United States ever since the Second World War. That leadership has been critical. And the commitment you showed, Mr. President, when you came out to the region, to the East Asia Summit, to APEC last year, that commitment was so important. It spoke volumes for America's continued commitment to our region, to our part of the world, to the Indo-Pacific. So vital. The engine room, if you like, of the fastest economic growth, the most rapid economic growth that we've seen in our times. Now, Mr. President, I want to thank you, as I have earlier in our meetings. I want to thank you for the very rare honour you have shown to Australia by naming one of your future littoral combat ships, the USS Canberra. That is, what a great symbol of our alliance and our shared security endeavours. What an extraordinary statement of commitment. And it's worth observing that that ship will be built by Austal in Mobile, Alabama. So you have an Australian company with American workers operating in the United States, building ships for the US Navy. What a great example of 100 years of mateship. And when you grieve, as you said, you noted at the outset, so do we. So we send our love, our prayers and our condolences to all of the victims and their families of the shocking shooting in the school in Florida. We are mates, we stand by each other, and when we are hurt as well. So, Mr. President, thank you for your warm welcome. 100 years of mateship. We celebrate 100 years ago on July 4. General John Monash led American and Australian troops into battle in the First World War for the first time. And we've been side by side ever since. 100 years of mateship celebrated and 100 more years to look forward to closer than ever. Thank you very much.